Welcome, everybody, both here and the online audience. Being that this is a week before the holiday of Shavuot, 3,326 years ago, the entire Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai and received the Torah. And unbroken chain, here we are. So dedicating this class to the topic of a pre-Shavuot workshop titled The Original E equals mc². And let's dedicate the class to Miriam Leah Bas Tzipora for a refuah shlema, a complete refuah shlema. She should have a speedy and complete recovery, as well as another dedication we have here is in loving memory of Elimelech Gedalia ben Meir, whose yahrzeit was this year. It's passing the 12th of Nisan, Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbos before Passover, dedicated by his daughter. And so let's get straight into the topic. The most famous equation in all of history and the world today is this E equals mc². It also happens to be an equation that most people have no clue what it really means. But I'm going to try to demonstrate in this class here that Einstein, of course, was Jewish, Albert Einstein. And though he may not have studied Torah, but it was in his genes, that the original E equals mc² and its fundamental core principles, which were revolutionary when Einstein wrote the theory as part of the special theory of relativity in 1905, which would be basically 109 years ago, were really all embedded in the events that took place 3,326 years ago. So that's a pretty strong statement. So even though Sinai was not a scientific per se event, but that which happened then set in motion and generated ultimately this concept of E equals mc². So what is E equals mc²? So if you know your basic physics, E equals energy. E is for energy, and M is matter, and C is the speed of light squared. And the equation, which sounds so simple, is basically this. If you want to know how much energy exists, you have to multiply mass by the speed of light squared, the speed squared. Now, everyone always wonders, what does this mean exactly? So let's take an example and understand the real contribution that Einstein made, because by explaining the theory, we'll then be able to, and the equation will be able to appreciate, as I said, the events that took place on Shavuot, the Matan Torah, so many thousands of years ago. In general, mass and energy, or you can say matter and energy, are considered to be were considered to be two mutually exclusive domains. Let's say you had a piece of wood. So yes, you can take a piece of wood and put it into fire, and the wood would feed the fire, would turn into flames, and continue to feed the fire until it like fuel. But the wood would then lose its wood properties and would turn into the gas or to ash or to whatever it was. Now, before Einstein, it was known that even when wood turns into fuel, if you measure the fuel, you measure the ashes, you measure the heat and all that together, you got the same amount as the wood itself. Basically stating that nothing disappears, it just changes form. The same is true with energy. If energy was changed form of energy, you could get the same measurement. You would always get the same measurement. In other words, there's nothing, you cannot destroy anything in this universe. And it could only change its form. This was well-known theories before Einstein. What Einstein came and did was proved that mass itself is energy. It's just concentrated energy. So think of it, if mass is made up of atoms, think of every atom like with a bundle of tightly packed energy. However, it's in matter you don't see the energy, so it seems invisible to us. But the fact is there is energy there, and it's made of energy. How do you release this energy? By accelerating an item. So let's say you take a baseball and you throw it. So when you throw a baseball, it's not just the speed, the mass itself is contributing to the energy. As a matter of fact, the more mass there is, the more powerful, and God forbid if that baseball hits somebody, and if it's a big baseball, and the speed is the quicker it is, so the speed plus the mass produces a very tremendous amount of energy. Okay, there it's a smaller amount. But he figured out that The energy that it creates is the amount of the mass multiplied by the speed squared. One of the good examples for this is an automobile. You drive a car, driving a car, and you, let's say, double your speed. You're going at 40 miles an hour, you're only going at 80 miles an hour. And taking into account the size of the car, you will need a brake to brake the speed squared. You'd need 4 times as much. In other words, you'd need to have 40. If you went 40, you'd need to have 360 miles to slow down the car, which proved that that mass, a piece of matter, with adding in its speed, produces amount of energy that produces a certain amount of energy. Bottom line is, in other words, that the world that we see, when we look around, you see a table, you see a chair, you see objects, it's really energy, except it's in a potential state. Another example given for it is, if you've ever gone on a roller coaster, right? So when you climb the roller coaster, let's say to the top, to the peak, and it stops for a moment. So you don't think, if you did not know better, you wouldn't know there's any energy there. But then suddenly, the roller coaster starts climbing or going down in such extreme speed. Where's that speed coming from? That speed is inside, it was built up during the climb, and now it is riding on that speed as it goes downward. So very clearly, speed is something, energy is something that doesn't necessarily have to be seen. Now, if you took any object and you just put it up on something, not necessarily would go with such type of speed. So in other words, energy is bottled up, and when you accelerate something, you release the energy, which is basically how we discovered how to create an atom bomb and how to release atomic and nuclear energy by taking basically a very small piece of mass and speeding up the particles to the extent that they release a tremendous amount of energy, which also explains why a microchip works. A microchip, you ever see the size of a microchip? It's almost like a hair follicle. And yet, we know today, in a computer, these microchips contain megabytes, if not gigabytes, many gigabytes of data. How could so much data fit into a microchip? Because when you accelerate and you know how to tamper with the particles, and you release a certain amount of energy. So the bottom line is, energy, therefore, is no longer seen as simply an exclusive entity. It is a direct product of matter. And all matter really is energy. And the interesting thing is, it could also be reversed. You can turn energy into matter. And that's also been proven in a laboratory. Now, I didn't come here for a physics lesson. What I find most fascinating, I think was so vital, is to take this now back to Sinai. You know, we live in a material world. Most of us are busy with our lives, and we are busy with making a living and the struggles of the material world. We also know the material world tends to divide us. You know, my possessions are not your possessions. So we have greed, we have jealousy, we have divisiveness, we have competition, and we have all that comes with that when people feel separate from each other. At the same time, we also know that we need love in our lives, and we need unity, and we need to connect to others. So the question can be asked, can the material world in which we live really allow us to find some type of peace? Or does materialism, by definition, separate and divide us? And this question was asked thousands of years ago, and this is the significance of Sinai. And I'll cite a medrash. The medrash says the following, that before Sinai, before Matan Torah, before the Torah was given, there was a split, a schism between Elyonim and Tachtenim, which was that which was above and that which was below. Basically between matter and spirit, between mass and energy. There was a split. And you could not bridge the two. That which belonged in the material domain remained material. That which belonged in the spiritual domain remained spiritual. There was no way to bridge it. And then the medrash continues, and this is a medrash written over 1,000 years ago, and says that at Sinai, when God came down on Mount Sinai, and Moses went up to meet him, this schism was bridged. Now from here on, spirit and matter are reversible. You can spiritualize the material world by using it for appropriate and proper and holy ends. And things change forever from there on. That matter and spirit are reversible. Essentially, E equals mc². I'll explain that more in a moment. So let's speak specifically, philosophically, in history you'll find different schools of thought of how they address the issue of finding a meaningful life, finding a purposeful life. So if you go to, for example, Far Eastern thinking, a lot of the Far Eastern philosophies preach basically asceticism, which means as long as you are preoccupied and consumed with material ends, that will distract you from finding inner peace. So there's the monastic lifestyle, where you live a simple life instead of pursuing wealth and belongings and acquisitions. You focus on your inner life, you focus on virtue, on kindness, on sharing, on friendships, on love, with a minimal preoccupation with the material world. Because as soon as you immerse in the material world, you're dealing with a world that distracts us, that keeps us very self-absorbed, very focused on self-interest. This is a school of thought, especially in the Far East, Eastern philosophies, whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, etc., etc. There's another school of thought, which is more Western type of thinking. I'll use a specific school of thought. It's called Calvinism. It's really the Protestant work ethic concept that developed in the 16th, 17th century by John Calvin, which became essentially a lot of what the Western model, which is not separating yourself from the world, working diligently and investing, but being virtuous. So it was not about separating yourself from the world, but engaging with it and living a virtuous life, which essentially is really much the model of the American. Essentially, capitalism was an outgrowth of Calvinism, with Weber and other thinkers that developed it into a philosophy where you are virtuous while you're being immersed in this world. At the end of the day, the question really is, can these two worlds meet? Do we have to either separate ourselves or immerse ourselves? Because when we immerse ourselves, there's always going to be some compromises, because you're involved. Now, this is a common philosophical issue, challenge, that exists throughout history. Throughout history was, if you want to maintain a high integrity, you have to avoid most of material involvement. I mean, look at let's take the Western world. Take New York, the capital of economy of the world. So you see, for example, I remember, we all remember September 11th. So there was a fellow who, after the tragedy, after the attack, came to me. He was completely mortified. I mean, like many people were, but he was particularly mortified. He says he had a friend that was killed in the World Trade Center, who worked in, Cantor Fitzgerald, was the prominent firm there that, unfortunately, many of their employees, almost all of them, were in that area where the biggest casualties were. And he said he was always envious of his friend, because his friend had this beautiful bay windows in the World Trade Center that he could see the whole Hudson River, all of Manhattan. You know, the view was very beautiful up on the 102nd floor. I'm not even sure what floor it was. And he says, I had this little dingy office a few blocks away, and I always look at that and I always was envious of him. Not that I wished him bad, but I was always envious. And now look what happened. Here he's gone, in a flash. And you hear this from many people. They hear people who go into different, let's say, in the world of finance, or even the world of law, where you begin very idealistic. You want to change the world in some way. You want to do something good with your life. And slowly, as the marketplace takes over, and the standards and the pressures and the competition and the demands and expectations of employers and so on, you start losing your soul, as many people put it, where suddenly real friendships don't exist. Everything is competitive. People say this all the time. They work in firms. Say, people who I began as friends, our bosses force us to compete with them. So we're all out trying to outmaneuver each other, because that's how more money is made, by playing people against each other. And he says, at some point, initially the angling of bonuses and profits and gains blinds you. And at some point, you look back at yourself and you say, I lost my soul, I lost my integrity. Where's my loyalties? Loyalties are not really appreciated unless it's loyal to the firm. Now, I'm not suggesting it's across the board 100%. There are obviously many ethical people, but the pressures of materialism, let's be honest, to use the words of the Meraglim, the scouts that Moses sent into Israel, which we'll be reading about in 2 weeks from now. They said it's a land that consumes its inhabitants. The material world is a land that consumes its inhabitants. I think we can all testify. I see you're all nodding, so I guess you've all tasted from the forbidden fruit. Hopefully do not lose your souls in the process. But that's what the materialism does. Why? Because it focuses on the immediate, on the here and now. Money we know we can never take to the next world. We know anything material in the material world is temporary. And yet it completely seduces us. To the point you get completely blinded by it. Because the illusion of power, the illusion of influence, I can buy anything. Most people will say, give me money and I'll have happiness. We all know, even people who say it know that it's not guaranteed. But it seems easy. If I had the money, I can buy whatever I want. And definitely not have to deal with the aggravations and the worries and concerns and anxieties of financial security. And when you talk money, it's not just money. Money comes with power and influence and class and status, etc., etc., etc. So one could argue that materialism is the enemy. You want to live a virtuous life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life, a life of love, a life of integrity. Materialism is not the place to involve yourself. Yes, you have to be involved minimally because we do live in a physical world. But if you make that your barometer of success, or to put it in other terms I've discussed other times, which is that you define your self-worth by your net worth, you're in big trouble. Because money and all that comes with material possessions cannot really give you security, because all of it is temporary. All of it dies. So it's like investing all your energy in something that is by definition temporary. So again, the argument would be, okay, so minimal preoccupation, like in the days of old, carry some water, chop some wood. Today maybe it's a little different. Get involved enough to pay your bills, and the rest of the time focus on what matters most. The Europeans like to say that Americans live to work and they work to live. The question is what they call living. It's another discussion. Living, indulging in your own pleasures is just, you might as well live to work. But if you take that to the farthest extent, and you say we work to live, that work is just a means to some higher spiritual end, then absolutely. But unfortunately, it's become an end in itself. And then we're left with that hunger and thirst inside of us for some transcendence. And that's, we search and we're desperate, so we seek out transcendence in any given way. And this I would submit as the reason that there's such a high rate of drug use, alcohol use, and other addictions, because when you're so consumed with materialism as being your God and being your end, then to satisfy the need that every human being has, the restless soul, for some type of relief, we grab whatever comes our way, whether it's destructive or not. Whereas a person who work would not be an overwhelming force that controls them, would then be able to seek out transcendence and seek out spirituality in healthy ways. So that's just a theory that I just threw into there. But basically what we have here seems to be a war going on. A war between matter and spirit. A war between mass and energy. Between matter and energy. And therefore what the Medrash says about Matan Torah seems very apropos. That which is material can never become spiritual. That which is spiritual can never become material. It's two separate worlds. However, that's not the case. This is where Judaism comes in and says, no, Matan Torah came to show us, as we say in the most famous Jewish prayer of all, you know the prayer, right? Shema. What's the last word in Shema? Echad. Hashem Echad. Echad means unity. And as I've explained many times, based on Hasidic thought, it says, the unity is not just there's one God and not many gods, not just monotheism versus plurality or duality or paganism, but rather one reality. All of existence is one reality. And it just takes on different shapes and forms. Now, until Matan Torah, until Sinai, 3,326 years ago, you could not access the energy within this material world, because its power was too strong. And Matan Torah, the Medrash says, V'aniya Maskal, God began and says, I am going to unleash the enormous spiritual power that lies in this material world. And though ostensibly it seems like your enemy, and it's a land that consumes its inhabitants, and it's a land that seems to compromise our integrity and challenge us all the time, the truth is, in this material world lies enormous storehouse, vast amounts of energy, waiting for you to release it. But there's one condition. You cannot consume yourself with the material world. You have to see matter as basically a springboard, a fuel for this energy. So you need to not just use matter. You need to take matter and accelerate it and include light into it, illuminate it, and then it becomes spirituality. So let's take an example. You're walking in the woods. It's a hot day. You're very thirsty, and you're very hungry. You suddenly see this apple tree. If you don't like apples, you can replace the analogy with plums, peaches, whatever you like, oranges, doesn't matter. I'm just using it. And you see this luscious, juicy looking apple, and you're hungry, so you grab it. Because you're so thirsty or hungry, you just indulge yourself, and that's that. You satisfied yourself. Which is a common thing that people do. How does the Torah look at it? It looks like this. This apple hanging in the tree was created by God, waiting for you to come one day to meet that apple. And you have three options. You could either ignore it, or you can do what I just described, indulge in it, or you can gently take the apple off the tree, be careful, sensitive, make a blessing on it, and say the energy that I'm going to now gain, as it quenches my thirst and my hunger, I'm going to use to help another human being. So then the energy that the apple gives you when you digest it, and it breaks down into becomes part of your blood and flesh and blood, now it's become a partner with you in helping make this world a better place. Just an example. We have millions of examples like this in our lives. Thousands every day. Every time you meet somebody, every time you go on a subway, every step you take, every breath you take, everything you do, you have three options. You could either ignore the moment and just move on. You can indulge and take the energy and do whatever you selfishly would want to do, including maybe hurting others. Or you can do the last option, which is the goal of it. So the material world is full of opportunity. The Kabbalists call this the spiritual opportunities. They call it spiritual sparks. Like fuel, like I mentioned before, fuel. Here's a table. This table can be used for no particular reason. It could be used for destructive reasons. It could be used for productive reasons. So it's not necessarily taking the table and putting it into a fire, but you spiritualize the material, and through that you relieve the tension between matter and spirit. That is E equals mc², as close as it gets. You take matter. Matter alone is inanimate, or so it appears, as I said. The energy, the kinetic energy, and the potential energy remains locked in it. You can think it's lifeless, but you can take and make it alive. There's a fascinating statement that says that when the Jews mentioned charity, when they gave tzedakah, they gave the machzis hashekel, the half shekel, the half coin that was given when it talks about in the chapter in Kisisa in the Torah, they would give half coins with which they purchased the offerings and so on. So there's an expression that says, God says to Moses says, how will we forgive the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf? And God says, this is what you shall give. And this will be, they're called kefana, this will redeem their souls. So the Medrash says that Moses was confused. He said, how could a coin redeem a soul? A coin is the symbol of materialism. It's money. A soul is a spiritual thing. How could a simple physical charity, if you say let's meditate, let's pray, let's daven, pray, let's study Torah, involved in spiritual activities, okay, I understand. So spirit strengthens spirit. But how could a mere coin suddenly forgive and redeem their souls? So the Medrash concludes and says that God pointed, I'm pointing and says, here it is. And he showed them a matbeya shalesh. He showed them that this coin that they give is a coin of fire, a fiery coin. So everyone asks the question, what is the significance of this symbolism? What do you mean a fiery coin? A coin is a coin. Whatever it's made out of, gold, silver, copper, other substances. What does it mean by a fiery coin? And the same question can be asked. I hope none of you have to say Yisker, but those of us that unfortunately have lost a parent or parents. So next week Rosh Hashanah, and several times a year, Yom Kippur, and 4 times a year basically, Yom Kippur and the 3 holidays of Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeret, we say Yisker. Yisker is a prayer where we remember our parents' souls. In it, the prayer says that you mention your father or mother's name, and you say, and mother's name, and then you say, in their honor, I will give this amount to charity. So the same question is asked. You're talking about a soul that's no longer here on earth. The soul is now in heaven. It's in the spiritual plane. Why is charity connected, a physical charity, which seems so material? Yes, we understand. With money you can buy things, you can build synagogues, you can build organizations. People need it. It's helping the needy. It's a good cause. We're not discussing. But why is that connected of all times with Yisker when you're remembering a soul? And the answer is based on what I was discussing, because matter is not a matter alone. When you use matter for the right thing, it turns into fire. It turns into a fiery coin. That's what God showed Moses. That if you use the material world for the right things, it turns into eternal, it releases an energy that forever changes the world. And what we want to do, when we want to connect to a soul, when we want to forgive a soul, want to redeem a soul, yes, you want to discover the energy within matter. You want to discover within the material world. It's not 2 mutually exclusive worlds. So bottom line is the following, that if you don't use it for proper things, then matter is a dead weight. If you use it for proper things, it becomes a source of energy that forever changes you and the world around you. And that's the option we have. And that's what happened at Mount Sinai. To explain a little more, we all wonder where a soul goes to after death. And in a very juvenile way, we look at the world and we say, hey, I see you, I see this. Where did this soul go to? This person now has died. The body is no longer alive. Where's the energy that was inside this body? So based on basic physics, even before Einstein, there's no such thing as matter disappearing. If something dies, it turns into energy. Nothing disappears. You can't destroy anything in this world. It just changes form. So the analogy I always give, the somewhat humorous analogy, imagine an imaginary conversation between a refrigerator and electricity. And the refrigerator says to electricity, where do you go after they pull the plug? And the electricity incredulously turns to the refrigerator and says, what kind of chutzpah, what kind of nerve do you have to ask me that question? You're a little box they just invented the last 100 or 200 years ago. And they've learned how to generate and contain my electricity into this little box to refrigerate food. And now you think you're the center of the universe. So the assumption is an arrogant one. You think you're the center. I go back to where I always was. Uncontained and unconfined in your little box. So everyone understands this. Now obviously we relate far more to a refrigerator than we do to electricity. Because electricity we can't really see. We can't really touch it. I mean, yes, you can get a shock and feel its power. But it's an invisible force, relatively speaking. So why not say exactly the same thing? When upon death, the plug is pulled, there's a disconnect between the matter, the body, and the soul. But the soul doesn't disappear. It just disappears from our view because we have physical eyes. We are controlled by the sensory tools of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. And that's what we define as real, as empirically real. But there are millions of things that don't fit. For example, love cannot be seen, tasted, touched, or smelled, or heard. You can express love with your senses, but it's not defined by your senses. Same thing with intelligence. How many ideas can your small little brain contain? Is there even a limit? Billions and billions upon ideas in a small little brain. Why? Because matter is energy. And what you see is not what you get. When you look at something, you only see the outer surface. You don't see the layers of embedded energy within it. And that was the real chiddush, the real contribution and innovation that happened at Sinai 3,326 years ago. God said, I'm giving you now the power to release the enormous reservoirs of energy that are waiting in the material world for you to release them. And it comes down to a simple equation, as I said. You have to take matter and accelerate it, You accelerate it by using it for something positive. That acceleration creates an energy. What is the energy? Energy equals matter multiplied by the velocity, by the speed squared. That's the key. Now, here's not the place to go into why Einstein wrote c squared as the speed of light. We know that the speed of light is the fastest thing. Nothing is faster than the speed of light. The main reason is because it's a constant number. Speed of light never changes. All other speeds are relative. But not to go into that, but light is light is exactly what I said, a matbeya shalesh, a coin of light, a coin of fire. So we have the opportunity, not just that the material world should not be our enemy. As I said, a land that consumes its inhabitants, that causes corruption and greed and all that I mentioned before, materialism that divides us. If you use matter for the right thing, you release its energy, and it becomes a source of light, a source of power, a source of energy. Because mass equals energy. But mass needs something to make it into energy. You have to illuminate it. You have to bring light into the picture. You have to speed it up. You have to accelerate it. So essentially, if you think about it, the equation that Einstein stated it already earlier, thousands of years earlier. It's not discussed in terms of physics and not used as an equation that can help build a technology. But the concept, the principle is absolutely there. Not only there, it's also a personal lesson. You know, when you study physics can be very practical as far as building different technologies. But what personal relevance does it have? So Matan Torah adds personal relevance. I wish I would have met Einstein. I would have shared this with him. I'd love to hear his thoughts on this. He was an intelligent man. He was very proudly Jewish as well. So it would have been interesting what he would say to this type of parallel. You know, because it's basically the concept. That's what it's about. And the fascinating thing is it gives us the opportunity to actually do this all the time. We don't need to just be not only technicians. To use the story from the Baal Shem Tov that one of my favorites, I love this story. It just it makes life so exciting if you're able to have this type of attitude. So the Baal Shem Tov, the story goes with Rab Chaim Rappaport, was one of his students, disciples, colleagues as well, I believe. So the Baal Shem Tov once sent him on a mission to go to a certain town and do something, to help someone there. Okay. He returns, mission accomplished. He returns, the Baal Shem Tov wants to know all the details, not just of the mission, but how he traveled. How did you go to travel to that particular city? So Chaim Rapport, he started sharing basic, how important could it be? But he sees the Baal Shem Tov really is adamant and wants to know exactly how he went, the GPS, what were the coordinates. So he says, well, I traveled this road, then I rested in an inn one night. The next night there was no inn, so I slept at the side of the road. And what happened in the morning? In the morning I woke up, I washed my hands, I said my prayers, and then I sat down to have something to eat that I brought along. And I went over to a brook of water to take a cup of water to drink. I made a blessing, and I drank the water. Baal Shem Tov, suddenly his face lit up, jumped up and said, that brook of water was waiting, that spring was waiting from the beginning of time for you to come to make a blessing on it. This was his approach. You think about this attitude to life. I've traveled many places in my life, spoken in many countries, continents, and so on. Often places that are a little bizarre too. I've been camping, did things in all kinds. And I always feel sometimes you go to a certain place, like that feeling when you go to the woods. Well, Robert Frost put it this way, that he was traveling in the woods, and a road diverged, and he saw one path was the one that most people traveled on, and he says, and the other one was the road less traveled on. He says, and I took the road less traveled on, and that has made all the difference. So when you come in the woods, you see a path that's tread well. Many people take that path because it's safe. Most of the people walked. But some of us like to take where there's no path. You like to just be like a pioneer, to make your mark. It could be more dangerous, it's more risky, but you make your mark. And I don't just mean this in a literal sense in the woods, it also in life. The path of conformity is always easier. It's our comfort zone. I always pass people, you go to a party, who do you gravitate to? The people you know or the people you don't know? No, you don't have to answer to yourself. And you'll see most people gravitate to people they know. It's safer. But that never makes you grow. That just reinforces your past. So in a way, it creates almost like recycled stale air. So if your past is not so great, you continue. It's like having no fresh air. This is like a ghetto mentality type of thing. Whereas when you meet new people, there's always fresh air, new ideas. You're challenged. They don't necessarily agree with you. So maybe it comes down to security. If you feel more secure, you're a person who can meet anybody, speak to anyone, even if people don't agree with you. If you're less secure, maybe you gravitate to the safe comfort zone. I'm not here to criticize. I'm just saying it's just a good indication of what people, how we are, how we behave. The truth is, naturally, children explore everything. It's only adults that cause children to start being fearful and so on. So it is true, you'll see children at a certain age avoid strangers, they're afraid, but so on. But if you really leave children on their own, they will explore everyone, they'll become friends with everybody. Except, of course, if they have an intuition or instinct that something is dangerous. So the idea of meeting new people, bringing fresh air into your life, walking on the road less traveled, is about conquering new horizons, new territory, so to speak. The Baal Shem Tov's approach, when people say, I'm bored, I have nothing to do today, and then they start looking for all kinds of relief, often not even healthy relief, or definitely nothing really meaningful. If you take the attitude of the Baal Shem Tov and you look at the world as your platform, your playground, and every piece of matter, wherever you go, is like that brook of water waiting for you to do something to elevate it, to turn it into fire, then the whole life takes on a different shape. Now, if you're controlled by the world of materialism, and matter controls you, then you will be brought down to the world of matter without mc². Then it's just matter, plain dead weight. But if you take the matter, like I said with the apple, or the water, or anything, you meet somebody, and that person, you can just ignore them, or you can sit and have a meaningless conversation with them, or you can have a meaningful conversation. You've taken matter that was, in a sense, inanimate or potential, and you turned it into something actual. And just as an example, look at any good business person, anyone who owns a company. Wherever they go, 24/7, they're always looking for opportunities. Everything is an opportunity. The Baal Shem Tov teaches, and Torah teaches, Judaism teaches, everything is a spiritual opportunity. So God leads the footsteps of a human being, wherever you're going to be going, tomorrow, tonight, the next day, God leads you there. What you're going to do with it is up to you. And you'll be meeting all kinds of forms of mass and matter. And the question is, will you be wise enough to understand that it's all there for you in order to release the energy and turn it into something that's divine, that's spiritual? You know, I can give you many, many examples. I'm sure you have examples. And you know how gratifying it is when you have basically a random encounter, if there's such a thing. And you do something spontaneous that really has permanent or perpetual impact. Those experiences are one of the most gratifying in all of life. You know, because we all make our plans. In Yiddish there's an expression, a mensch tracht and Gott lacht. A person thinks and God laughs. In Yiddish those rhyme. But you know, there are the things that we go, like I mentioned, God leads the footsteps of a person. So you think you may end up somewhere on vacation this summer, or for business, or for a holiday, or for just whatever reason. You think you went there with your plans. You went for a business meeting, you went for fun, you went for a vacation, whatever it is. The truth is, there's a far deeper reason for you to be there. But had a little angel come to you and say, listen, I need you to go to this and this place, there's a spiritual purpose there. Say, I'm too busy now, middle of work, and so on. So what God does, He sets you up and gets you to have an ostensible reason that you feel is important for you. While you're there, there's always a deeper reason. Try out this attitude next time you travel somewhere. Next time you go somewhere. Keep your eyes open for the unexpected. And you'll see the greatest things in life in the unexpected. All the plans we make, they could be very nice plans, but sometimes we lose sight of what really matters because our plans get in the way. I have examples of this. I mean, I've embraced this attitude every time I go anywhere. Even if there's a reason, I'm always looking for that person I'm going to meet that I didn't expect to meet. Always open to it. And many other people know I came here for a plan. I have no time for anything else. It's really not the right attitude to take. Because every piece of matter, every experience in time and space is essentially energy, energy waiting to be released. And waiting to change you and change that person. And I've shared with you this story, this just comes to mind. I was traveling to it was at least 10 years ago. I was going to East Hampton for a weekend Shabbaton to speak. And on the way, I stopped to get some gas. So, pretty mundane thing, right? Pure mass. Gas for the car. Gasoline. While I'm there, right next to the gasoline station was a club. And I saw there was an attendant there parking cars for the party that night. He came over to me and said to me, "Are you staying for the party?" So I said, "Not this party. I have another party to go to." Anyway, we struck up a conversation. He was very intrigued with me for some reason. And he says to me, "What do I do?" So I said, "I write, I teach." "What do you write about?" I told him spirituality, psychology, Judaism, the universal message. So he said to me, "Put me on your email list if you have email." He gave me his email address. Okay, that was that. At least 5 years later, I get an email from him. He writes to me, "You probably don't remember I was the parking attendant that you met 5 years ago or a number of years ago in some town. I forgot the name of the town. Maybe it was Coram. And you probably didn't know I was Jewish either because I looked like this redneck kid. The fact is I'm Jewish. I'm born to my parents, unfortunately, tragically were killed in a car accident when I was young. I never had any Jewish education, but I want you to know that your emails have become my Judaism. I pray with them, I study them, I celebrate the holidays with them." And he started counting. He says, the Rosh Hashanah email you sent, that became my Rosh Hashanah service. Yom Kippur email, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, Hanukkah, Purim, Passover, and so on. He says, "I've not attended anything, but your emails, I wait every Thursday night, and this is my serving God." More or less what he wrote. I thought to myself, wow, it's unbelievable. I realized right there and then that why is there an internet? Why did God create technology? So we all have reasons we think it's in order to enrich us, to entertain us, to keep us busy, social media. I mean, when all the technology and all its intrusions on our personal lives, and on one hand it's supposed to be enhancing life. I don't know if it's enhancing relationships. It's definitely not enhancing communication. I was sitting in a car once, driving with someone, and I'm trying to get his attention, and he's texting, and he's just ignoring me. So I decided to text him. We're sitting right near each other. So I texted him, and he looks at the text. He says, wondering. Then he says, "One second, why are you texting me? You're sitting right near me." I said, "Because I can't get your attention the last hour." So I don't know how you feel about it all. To me, it's like an intrusion. Once we were last time you had an eye-to-eye conversation without any gadget to escape to. And I'm not fire and brimstone against technology. I think it's the greatest blessing. Only when you know how to use it. Like anything, junk in, junk out. Matter, if you don't use it right, it becomes dead weight and actually can destroy your life. Like I said earlier, a land that consumes its inhabitants. However, if you see it as potential divine energy to fulfill the purpose of your life, then it changes things dramatically. Because this guy, where I met in Long Island, no way, unlikely that he would be coming to drive to New York to come to a class. But an email, what was an email? I press a button. My office presses a button once a week. The email goes to thousands of people without a pen, no charge, immediate, unbelievable. So it's like a lesson in life. We all use your mobile phones or other social media and so on. Think of it. Maybe that was sent to you in order to send a nice, warm message to somebody. And that way you redeem and you unleash the power of what technology really is to make this world a better place. So fine, we want to use it for our personal things and entertainment or business, etc. Great. But why was it created? It was created in us for us to release its energy into doing something positive. So it's a simple resolution we could all make, which is every day make sure to forward an email, a nice email to someone. No, you never know. A lonely soul. Somebody just needs a few encouraging words. I remember a similar example. I became after that actually an email junkie. Wherever I go, I always ask people for their emails because I realized it's the easiest way to reach somebody. And the mess and the work I do is about sending people life-affirming messages. It reminds me, 2 years ago, I got a letter from another woman, an email. She writes to me that she had a horrible year that year, went through an ugly divorce. She lived in Austin and then ended up in Seattle. And she says, but your emails were the only redeeming factor in my life. Thursday nights, Friday mornings, I'd wait for them. It's like the ray of light among all the chaos. Thing like that. And then she writes, just to tell you how powerful, because it captures the same theme. She writes to me, I'm a sculptor by profession. And I like to just conclude with the line that Michelangelo said when he was asked, how do you carve those beautiful angels in the marble? So he says, I see the angels trapped in the marble, and I carved and set them free. So she says to me, it was right before Rosh Hashanah show, as a New Year message, she writes, so thank you for releasing my angel. Same idea. What did Michelangelo say? I'm not creating. In the marble is all the energy. Is the angel. And all we need to do is carve away, and the angel emerges. This is quintessential Jewish thinking. All of us are born flowers. We're born musical notes. We're born angels. But then our lives get distracted, and we get trapped in marble, concrete, other substances that I won't mention here. And suddenly, that beauty that you have, your inherent beauty that defines who your soul, what your soul is like, is trapped. But it's in there. The energy is in there. That's what the Shavuos teaches. That the energy is in there. It's just trapped. So what do you do to get rid of the trap? You have to do something. It's not going to release itself. So in the case of a sculptor carves and carves. In our case, what we have to do is not get distracted or trapped or seduced by the material. We have to see it as a springboard, as I mentioned, as the potential. You have to accelerate it. That's what it means. You have to do something to it. You have to heat it up. You have to do something that gets the energy out of it. So if you just leave it as is, the energy will remain trapped. If you do something, you do a mitzvah, which means connection. You connect it to something. Then suddenly that email, that technology, that piece of matter, that interaction, anything you do suddenly comes alive. Tell me if there's a better antidote to boredom and monotony than that. People say, I'm bored. You're looking for some outside simulation. Why don't you just look around? Everything that's right now on your platter, everything given to you, is God telling you, here's matter, turn it into energy. So the principle, the fundamental core principle of E equals mc², which is that energy is matter multiplied by the speed of light twice, or squared, is essentially the message of the Torah. Take the material world, don't be deceived in thinking it's inanimate, dead. Realize that it's always brimming with unbelievable potential, and carve away and release the energy. Isn't there a better, what better mission can we have than that? And each of us can achieve that in our own way through our work, through our professions, through our unique skills. Because no two of us are alike. And I remember we're sitting with once, there's a couple that were coming here for a while to the class. They were dating, but they were like perpetual, what do we call, serial daters? As in SERIAL. They were dating. And anyway, after one of the classes, the woman comes over with him and says, we're dating now for, I don't know how many years it was. It was a number of years. We know everything about each other. How do I convince him to let's get married? We're ready together. Do you mind speaking to him? And he was open to it. He said, yeah, fine. He wasn't like defensive or anything. Great. So we scheduled a time to meet. We met at the Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn. There's a cafe upstairs there near the Botanical Garden. I don't know if you've ever been there. Beautiful place. And we had this little meeting, chat. So, in our conversation, we started talking. I went through all the usual suspects. All the usual suspects of, what could be the cause that he should have such resistance. And everything didn't seem to be a problem. At first I thought his parents, did they have a good relationship? Yes, they had a good relationship. Any divorce? No divorce. So there was no real reason. Why would he be afraid of fear of commitment? All the different, as I said, the usual suspects. Nothing seemed to check out. Everything seemed, Then suddenly I had this intuition. And I said to him, I think you have no commitment to anything in life. is there anything in this lifetime, in this world, that you'd be ready to die for? That you'd be ready to go all the way? I don't mean die physically, just to do whatever it takes. He says, no, everything is optional. And I said, that I don't think it's the issue with a woman that you're dating. I don't think the issue of marriage per se is commitment. You're just keeping your so-called, options open. That's the life. I said, what type of life is that? You don't have anything in your life that you're ready to go all the way. And he was looking at me. And then he says to me, and what about you? What do you have? What's your so-called thing that you're ready to die for or fight for? So this was a very, spontaneous conversation. I didn't prepare a script or lines. So I don't know, for some reason, just naturally, what he evoked was a memory that went back to when I was a little child. And I shared with him. I said to him, when I was a little kid, maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, I don't even remember the age. And I used to go to school every day, so we could go by bus. But it was also walking distance. By bus it was 5 minutes, but walking distance, 20, 25 minutes. And I said that often when it would rain outside, I would walk. Which you'd think, the opposite. You walk when it's nice day. I would like to walk in the rain. But that was not the quirk. The quirk was, why did I like to walk in the rain? Because I would walk by the edge of remember, I'd be down Bedford Avenue or Nostrand Avenue to my yeshiva, which was on Bedford and Dean. I lived on Sullivan Place and Nostrand. So I would walk. And I said, I liked walking because I had this little secret quirk. And I really did not remember it until he challenged me like that. I said, you know what it was? That when it would rain, the streets of Manhattan and New York, so there's the curbs, and the rain runs on the edge of the curbs into the sewers in the corner. But they get stuck sometimes because there's twigs or dust or paper or other garbage. So I had this quirk where I'd like to just clear a path and let the water run smoothly through. I'm not embarrassed to share this. We all have our little quirks. And I said, something? I had some very deep pleasure to open up a blocked passage. And I could tell you, even today, now it's 40 years later, 50 years later, I still have that passion. I don't do it in the rain anymore. I have some personal, deep gratification when I meet people, and I can help unblock an obstacle, a blind spot, psychologically, open up a channel that they didn't feel was there. Like a sculptor, carve and let them discover a deeper strength that they may not have been aware of, or give them confidence. In that sense, I have the same pleasure. Now he began to cry, this guy, and I also did actually, because he says that's unbelievable, that's so moving, and it's so real, because it's now, and in some ways it defines very much what I do today. I don't know if the connection to when I was 5 years old really, I just came to that connection when I was speaking with him, but the idea was that, imagine every person you meet is really a flower, everyone, even a person, even a criminal in prison. However, that flower got so trapped in whatever it is that they ended up doing that they have to be put away because they're that destructive to others. But everyone fundamentally is a beautiful soul. That's invisible. It's trapped in the matter of our lives, in the mass. What you see is mass. The body, the material world, the businesses we're involved in. And you see people focused all on the mass, on building more matter, gathering, hoarding, accumulating, acquiring. But there's a soul trapped inside there. And you don't have to give them anything. You have to just help them shed some layers to allow the angel to emerge, to allow the flower to emerge, to allow the music to emerge. So think of it like this, when there's a rush hour and so much noise outside, you're not going to hear subtle music. But the Zohar says each of us has our own unique music. Every one of us releases a certain melody, your song. And it's yours, unique to you. No one that ever lived and no one that ever will live has your song. But because you're so distracted and so busy with other noises, you don't hear. That's how it is, right? You don't hear the subtle sounds, stirrings of a violin or other instruments when there's a lot of extra, curricular noise. And that's a mission that we all are here, is not to allow ourselves to get distracted by the mass. Recognize there's energy within, but you have to do something about it. You have to act in it. You have to dedicate. You have to be proactive and say, I'm going to find a way to release the energy. This, my friends, is the lesson of Matan Torah. 3,326 years ago. and why it's relevant today. Why would we still be honoring something so many years later? Because it unleashed, as I said, a power that helps us transform our lives today, that helps us understand what are the purpose of our lives, and tells us you have all the resources and tools to turn matter into energy. As I said, I hope Einstein's soul is hearing this wherever he is, but I really would have loved to be able to ask him whether he thinks this is consistent with his theory. So, E equals mc², a theory, the most famous equation of them all, is essentially the story of Shavuot, the story of Matan Torah. Energy is released when you take matter, you do something with it. When you accelerate it, when you connect it to light, to warmth, to illumination, to anything that makes it move. Or else it just remains sitting there. You accelerate it, and it releases enormous amounts of energy. That's Jewish thinking. That the world, the way the Maimonides puts it, that we should always see the world as like a scale, where all the good and all the evil cancels each other out. They balance each other. And your one good deed tips the scale. That's how he says we should look at our lives. In other words, it's not about quantity. Quality. One act can change everything. You say, 1 second, who am I in a world of 7 billion people? But you don't need religion or faith. Just look into physics. One strand of hair can create a nuclear explosion that can devastate or build a universe. So why is it inconceivable to think that one good deed with the mass or matter that is with you can change a universe? You have the butterfly effect. Someone sneezes in Kansas City, and it can cause a typhoon in Singapore, or whatever cities they. Why? Because we know today that it's not about quantity. Size does not matter. It's quality. Look at DNA, cellular structure, subatomic. These things are all invisible to the naked eye, but they shape everything. A healthy human being, or a mutation, God forbid, and the most minuscule microscopic place can cause devastation. A computer program that can have millions of code, millions of lines of code. Add one dot or take out one dot, and the whole program won't work. So it's no longer large armies, empires, brute force, firepower. It's about appreciating the energy that lies in every small little thing. And I don't know if there's a greater confirmation that today's technology, modern physics, once upon a time we all know to be able to compute data that we compute today in a handheld like this, needed blocks of computers in 1955. Blocks, literally blocks and blocks. How's it possible? How'd they get it all into this little thing here? It all based on this concept that matter and energy are basically interchangeable. However, when we look at matter, it deceives us into thinking that it is what it is. There's nothing else in it. So science today corroborates something which, as I said, goes back 3,326 years. So I want to wish everybody with that Shavuot is coming up Tuesday night. And it's a 2-day holiday outside of Israel. It's a custom that people go the first day, this will be Wednesday, to go to synagogue to hear the 10 Commandments. The Medrash says that when we hear the 10 Commandments, it's like recreating the events that happened at Sinai those many years ago, over 3 millennia ago. And it's unbelievable to be part of a chain, a link in a chain that has not been broken for thousands of years. I mean, that alone tells you. And the Jewish people are a small nation. It says, Atem ma'at mikol ha'amim. We're only 14 million people. And look at the headlines that we conquer. Look at the percentage of Nobel Prizes, if that's what impresses you. A little country the size of New Jersey dominates the news more than any other country, for good or for bad. And that just also captures how something minuscule contains enormous amounts of energy. So everyone should have a very good Shavuos. If you need any help with the holidays, please be in touch with us. It's an honor to always speak to you, as I said, to discover the music, the angel within all of you. And until next week, there won't be a class. Well, there will be in 2 weeks. Philip is giving his class. And again, it's been an honor to speak to you all and take the matter of your lives and turn it into energy. Thank you very much.